Welcome into the Saints Insider Podcast for Wednesday, June the 4th. I'm Zach Ewing with our Times-Picayune Saints beat writers, Matthew Paris to my right, Luke Johnson to my left. Going to talk a little Saints defense today. It feels like we've been neglectful to the defensive side of the ball a little bit. We've talked a lot of quarterback. We talked a lot of coaching staff and wide receivers and all that stuff. There's a whole other side of the ball that the Saints used to be pretty good at that I have questions about.
Well, I think that was the whole point of it, is we all had a bunch of questions and no real concrete answers, right? Until we got a chance to see a couple of OTA practices. We've seen two of them now. We'll get to see another one tomorrow. And I think we have a better feel for at least what the defense might look like structurally now versus what we did when it was just guessing what Brandon Staley would be doing based on his previous defenses. So I think we're in a better position to talk about it now than we were before.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, it's important, right? Because the defense, I really feel like if this team's defense had stayed at its prior level, Dennis Allen maybe is still here, Matt. I like, maybe that's controversial to say, but that was the side of the ball I think let the Saints down more even than on offense. It was injury based. On defense, it was just performance based.
No, I mean, you think about last season, the defining game of that era was that that the Broncos game where they totally, crap the bed in prime time, and you have Richard Sherman asking if players have quit on Dennis Allen. The defense was Dennis Allen's calling card, and there was a case to be made. You could have maybe fired him then after that game, and they just never really recovered. And I think you saw a couple fall-offs in key areas, and that's the thing I have the questions about Brandon Staley is, can he get the pass rush better? Can they stop giving up explosive plays? That'll be the sign to me of this defense has really improved if, he can shore up some of those areas.
Yep. And obviously the headline here is that the scheme changes, right? It's going to be a 3-4 instead of a 4-3. We'll talk about Chase Young, Carl Granderson are going to be standing up in pass rush, and Cam Jordan might be doing that. I think it's also important to remember, Luke, that that's the base defense. We're still going to see an awful lot of nickel. I mean, the changes won't be super dramatic just because an NFL defense has to have certain elements.
That's true, but I still think it's going to look different in nickel than it has in years past. I don't think it's going to be just meaning that in previous iterations of the Saints defense under Dennis Allen, even in a nickel package, they still had 4 down linemen who, were all effectively in a 3-point stance. Sometimes you'd see a guy in a 2-point stance, but he was still very rarely did you see somebody in that wide 9 alignment, way out wide of the tackle. I think we're going to see a little bit of that this year. I think we're going to see some kind of funky looking fronts even when they're in their nickel defense. And I think we're going to see a lot of pre-snap shifts on that defensive front to try to confuse the offensive line and mix up their assignments. And we're going to see some, like Jeff brought up in a story, some nickel pressures from players like Alontae Taylor and others. So yes, they are not going to be sitting there on the field with 3 defensive linemen and 4 linebackers for much of a game. But I do think it is going to look different than it has over the last close to a decade under Dennis Allen.
And the thing you didn't bring up there, which I think is also going to be a big change in nickel, is the types of plays they're calling. You think about third down, Dennis Allen loving press man coverage. Brandon Staley loves a lot of zone. And, Dennis Allen did play a fair amount of zone. They played more zone than they did man. But Brandon Staley really loves zone. And the reason they love zone is because they can also have some man tendencies with it, too. You can play match coverage, which kind of blends the best of both worlds. And so, we'll see if players are able to pick it up. That's kind of been the knock on Staley. If you read about his Chargers tenure, is sometimes the game plans are so convoluted. Players apparently wondered whether, the coach was buying into him so much that, maybe he needed to dumb it down a little. I'm interested to see the lessons learned kind of from his Chargers stint, because they didn't have the best defenses in the world, but when he was a coordinator with the Los Angeles Rams, they were lights out that one year. And I think Staley still has a pretty good defensive reputation too. So I'm excited to see it.
Well, let's start there with Brandon Staley. I'm glad you brought that up because you should read Jeff's column. Jeff's flying to Sicily and he's going to go peek inside an active volcano or something like, you know, we'll see. We'll see how tan Dunk is when he comes back. But
or crisp.
yes, exactly. But he did write a good column after talking with Brandon Staley. So go to NOLA.com/Saints, read that if you want more information. Staley comes from the Vic Fangio tree, and he is very cerebral, and he does have a lot of these ideas. And that, I think that should excite Saints fans just from the standpoint of maybe he does get it to click. Maybe he does have these fresh ideas to come in here and see the player and Alontae Taylor is, see the player Chase Young is, that we can all see glimpses of at times, but now he's going to unlock them and realize some of that potential.
Yeah, and I don't think we should go in like expecting that necessarily. Like, but I do think that there is an opportunity for these guys in a new scheme to really find something more out of themselves. And for other players, it might mean it's just not a fit at all, and they're clearly not. They don't belong in this scheme, right? But I do think the two guys you mentioned are two who I think a lot of people would look at in this new scheme and say, like, maybe there's a lot more there. We've been saying that about Chase Young for a while, but like, yeah, we saw Zach Bond go to this system last year and go absolutely berserk, and he was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. There's definitely a chance there's somebody on this roster who's like an ideal fit for this defense, who Brandon Staley sees an avenue for that maybe Dennis Allen didn't, and they have a player. So the two you mentioned, I think, are the best bets. I think Alontae Taylor, we've seen like the big time flashes out of him. It just hasn't been consistent enough. If they're able to get him to sustain that higher level, he could be like a Pro Bowl caliber player for this team. Chase Young, just the whole thing about him his entire career has been potential. If he's able to unlock that, if that kind of stand up edge rusher role suits him better than some of the 4-3 stuff that he has been working in, I think there's a chance that he becomes a really good player. And he's still very young. What is he, 26, Matt?
Yeah, maybe a little
Why would
older.
Matt know that?
27?
Why
26?
would Matt know
Why would
that?
Matt know that?
I'm pretty sure he was
It's his
25.
sixth year.
I'm pretty sure he was 25 when he
Yeah,
signed
26 sounds right.
26 does sound right. He was 21 when he entered the league.
And we, you always lose track of exactly
He's 26,
when the
correct.
birthday is and everything. But yeah, I think
April 14th.
Yeah, turned 26 in April.
so. He's still a young guy, and I think let's start there. Let's start with Chase Young, Carl Granderson. Cam Jordan, you could throw in this category too. I don't know how much he is going to play, frankly, just because he's older and this is a new role, and I'm just not sure. But these stand-up outside linebackers who are going to be pass rushers, Staley he told Jeff, again, if you read his column, he's had them drop weight. He's being very forthright about what he wants from these guys. They're both down to like 265, 260, and they're going to stand up and rush the passer from the linebacker position. Obviously, that's different. Do you think that could unlock Chase Young, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, Chase Young's an interesting player because he's at his best when he rushes with power, I think. And sometimes I think he thinks he's more of a speed guy. I mean, he's very explosive. There's no denying that. It's just, I think Young, to his credit, he's gotten better throughout this career of kind of realizing what he's needed to do. And I'll be interested to see the vision Staley has for Chase Young, just because you think about how close he's gotten with some of these pressures, and it's, you've got to actually take down the quarterback, and can he help with that? I don't know.
Yeah, it's the pressure. The pressures have always been there, especially last year with the Saints. He was one of the top 10 in the NFL in pressures. They just weren't turning into sacks. So coming from a little farther away, a different angle.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And he's gotten, I mean, to his credit, to Staley's credit, he's gotten good pass rush production out of his defensive ends. I mean, Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack are two of the better players in this game, but they're both kind of, Khalil Mack is smaller than Chase Young is, but I think they kind of have those prototypes on the roster at least, and we'll see how they do.
There are a few like square peg and round hole feels on the personnel Staley's got to what he wants to do. Do you think Carl Granderson is one of those? Is he just on the other side because we have to put somebody there, or do you think Granderson fits in this role?
TBD, honestly.
Yeah.
we've only seen him do one thing, and that's true for a lot of these guys. Cam Jordan, outside of the weird interior pass rush thing they had him do last year, we've pretty much only seen them in one role. Specifically, guys who've been with the team for a long time, like Carl Granderson has. I do think that there's a chance. Look, the Saints asked him to put on a ton of weight throughout his career. I think he got here like 255 or something like that, 260. He was playing at like 285 last year. And in Jeff's column, I think he had him down at 265. That is at least probably closer to his natural playing weight. And it'll be interesting to see if, like, when somebody's playing kind of at that spot versus where he had been, if he's maybe able to sustain a little bit better. Because I think that's much like Alontae Taylor. That's always been the issue with Granderson. There's weeks where he looks like a dominant Pro Bowl type player, and then there'll be like a 4-week stretch where he just disappears and doesn't have any impact on the game. So, that's going to be the question with a lot of these guys. Like, can he get more out of them on a more consistent basis, specifically in the pass rush? When you look at Dennis Allen's best defenses here, like, they were a top 5 pass rushing unit, and they were winning with 4 most of the time. Like, he wasn't like a really super blitz heavy coach. Like, if they were able to just elevate that part of the game, and there's parts of it that go along with it, right? The run defense has to be better, so you can get him in more pass rushing situations. That coverage has to work with the pass rush, the match zone coverage Matt was talking about. But, like, if that can improve, like, we could see this defense take a big jump, because they've been a really weak pass rushing team with a lot of their production coming in like spurts, right? They'll have like an 8 or 9 sack game, but that's taking up like 25% of their season pass rush total. So I want to see if they can get more out of guys like Granderson and Young and get them to play more consistent. And if they can, like, I think it has a chance to be okay.
Cam Jordan, we'll see about. The other guy I wanted to mention was Isaiah Foskey. Could this unlock Foskey? No, nothing else has so far.
I would be shocked, but I mean, we've seen him out there. Like, the hard part of OTAs is there's still some guys missing, so you don't know where. I mean, edge rusher is not really a spot like that, but I'm thinking, linebacker. We've seen a lot of Danny Stutzman because Demario Davis hasn't been at the practices the media has been at anyway. So I do think generally there are a lot of weird fits between the old personnel and this new scheme. I think this is going to be a transition year for the Saints. A lot of guys that they drafted, I think, are backups right now, but maybe as the year progresses, they start to play more, and you see that transition a little bit unfold throughout the year.
Yeah, I think Foskey's a tough one to project anything on, because he hasn't played.
Yeah.
They need some depth though at that spot. I mean, you can't just have Granderson and Young.
But like, he's been somebody who's been a giant whiff for his 2 years here, and there's absolutely nothing tying this organization to Isaiah Foskey anymore.
Right.
And if, let's say they go to training camp and they're playing live contact reps and Fadil Diggs looks really good,
right,
7th round draft pick. Is there anything stopping the Saints from keeping the 7th rounder over a 2023 second rounder? No, especially because he has 0 skins in the wall.
Yeah, the weird thing about Foskey is that he was pretty productive in college.
He's very productive in college.
We joke that the Saints love their raw tools guys without so much production, but Foskey, he was an accomplished player, and it just hasn't worked to this level so far.
I think he had the tools and the production.
Yeah,
because I think he was like a 9+ RAS guy. Mm-hmm. And I think he had 10+ sacks in each of his last 2 years at Notre Dame. It's not like he's doing that against Old Dominion or whatever.
Right.
But like, there were a lot of concerns about, like, from smart evaluators about like whether those skills would translate to the NFL, even though he had the athleticism testing numbers and the production. And I think those concerns have played out correctly, even though I thought Foskey was a good pick at the time because of all the things we just mentioned. But for whatever reason, it hasn't panned out. And so this is a really important time of year for him to show that he can do it, because I think there are guys behind him who could take his roster spot if he's not careful.
Yeah, there's a reason why we've said on the show a few times, like, edge rusher is probably going to be their first-round pick next year.
Feels like it. Yeah, I mean, one thing
Unless it's quarterback.
Yeah, unless they go 3-14.
and Garrett Nussmeier sitting there. I think one thing we did last summer, and we'll do it again here in the next 6 weeks or so before training camp, we did like a young player draft, which Saints players have the most potential going forward. And like Foskey, was he picked last year, even a year after he was drafted? I don't remember that he was. He certainly wouldn't be this year. So the Saints don't whiff often on these draft picks, but that one feels like it. Maybe this is his last chance. Going to the 3 part of the 3-4, the guys who will have their hands in the ground, what you're looking at is probably Nathan Shepard, Colin Saunders, Devon Godshaw at nose tackle. And then the part that really interests me is like, where does Brian Bresee fit in this? He's probably going to be a defensive end. He moves out there.
Yeah, which I don't think is a bad idea, honestly. I think that probably fits more what he is, like a 3-4 defensive end. Mm-hmm. He's like 6'5", 300 pounds. I think maybe playing like head up on a tackle in like a 5 technique position is maybe going to help alleviate some of the leverage problems that he had against kind of shorter guards who got under him. So like, I mean, obviously, like we have to see that too, right? But I think the one thing that he's shown he's really capable of so far is pass rush. I think that'll still play out there. So I don't know. We'll see. It's kind of though like it's like a hybrid defensive tackle, defensive end position though. It's like the guys who are mainly responsible for the pass rush are still going to be Granderson, Young, Cam, who are going to be like the stand-up edge rushers.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it works, it takes away from his weakness, which is run defense, that he could be in a less vulnerable position out there.
Yeah, the guy who has really popped for me in terms of that front alignment is Vernon Broton. We kind of questioned the pick at the time, but seeing him out there, I mean, Stutzman isn't going to play over Demario Davis, but from what we've seen in OTAs, and it's still early, I think Broton could carve out a nice role on this team as a rookie. He could be that defensive end, kick to defensive tackle on the inside. Now he's going to have to earn it throughout training camp, but I think they kind of have a plan for him. And, I think that's one of the spots maybe opposite Bresee if you're just trying to...
Well, if it's not Broughton, who is it?
Yeah. Jonah Williams.
It would have to, you're looking at a career backup, a career practice squad guy in Jonah Williams. I'm not sure looking back on it, you're right. That's probably why they took Vernon Broton. I don't think they had anybody to play there.
Yeah.
At least not an obvious choice.
Right. I think Broughton's going to start.
I do too.
I mean, they talked after the draft. I think it was Mickey who said they considered taking him in the second round, which is like way ahead of where anybody had him projected. I think Dane Brugler had him as like a 4th projection. As some people had him outside their top 150 altogether in their prospect rankings. But like you can see when he's out there what excites him about him. So obviously like this is all subject to change once they put pads on and everything like that. But I mean, as it looks right now, like he could be like a 17-game starter for him as a 3rd-round draft pick, which I think would be a good thing unless he's only out there by virtue of having literally nobody behind him.
Yeah,
I mean, the Saints draft, the people who panned it was because of those 2nd and 3rd round picks. You reached for Tyler Shuck, you reached for Vernon Broton, and those guys, along with Kelvin Banks, you could have 3 guys end up starting every game if they're healthy.
Yeah, and I think there's a good chance that Quincy Riley's a starter for him too.
Sure.
Unless they make some more additions in free agency.
And they brought in Jonathan Bullard the other day. That's what I was looking up to see where exactly he, was. And the pass rushing, is he more of an edge rusher? Is he more of an inside defensive end? But the fact that they brought him in, I think, is maybe a sign that they at least want to see what else they have there. They didn't sign him, but like the defensive end spots are very much a work in progress.
Yeah.
As we talk about that transition,
Jonathan Bullard feels very much like a 3-4 defensive end guy. I can't remember his height, weight. I think he's close to 3 bills, if I remember correctly, and
Same.
And he's not a pass rusher, like 6.5 career sacks, but he's played a lot of football. I think he started 17 games to the Vikings last year. Pretty good defense.
I mean, you can't just hand the job to Broton, right? Like you got to bring somebody in to make him earn it. You can hand a job to Brian Brzee, maybe. You can't just bring a 3rd-round rookie in and say you're starting there no matter how you look in camp.
Yeah, and honestly, like have we seen much of Cam Jordan in the OTAs?
Not really.
Like,
I mean,
Could Cam move down to the
could Cam play 3-4 defensive end, or
6'3", 290? By the way,
is Cam going to be one of the stand-up guys? Like I don't think we've seen much of that at all during OTAs. It wasn't. It wasn't last week.
The day that he wasn't there last week, but the first week he was just like purely stand-up.
Okay.
If you had to guess today, who starts at nose tackle?
Well, we haven't seen a single second of Devon Godshaw, so
yeah.
I mean, I still think he would be the guy, but just because he's been a nose tackle throughout his career. But like, if not him, I guess Colin Saunders.
Yeah,
but we haven't seen Nathan Shepard yet either,
stuff.
right?
I haven't seen Shepard. We've seen Jonah Williams, but more of a D end.
Yeah, there's still a lot of guesswork here. I mean, again, that's a spot I'm a little bit square peg round hole if it's not Godshaw, because he's probably the one guy who fits there.
Yeah, Godshaw's been a 3-4
Christian
D tackle.
Boyd's pretty big. He could.
Well, that was his whole thing coming out.
Yeah.
But they were
Ridgeway.
just an awful run defense last year, and he got no playing time. He was inactive a lot of games. So again, this is like what does a new staff see in players, but like he's somebody we still haven't seen much of. Right. So even though that was his strength coming out of Northern Iowa, and I think he was on the active roster for all 17 games last year, he was like a healthy scratch for a bunch of them on a team that was just atrocious against the run. So like I need to see it before I can really consider him being part of the mix, especially with all the veteran talent all the veteran players they have on the roster.
Yeah, the fact that they traded for Ridgeway right before the season started, I think, kind of was indicative of how they maybe felt about that situation and tried to fix it on the fly, and it didn't work.
All right, so that's kind of the front seven. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about the secondary, which is the other spot where this is really going to change. We haven't mentioned linebackers as much, middle linebackers, but we can when we come back as well here on the Saints Insider.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. With Quick Picks, you can tap right into pre-built, ready-to-bet parlays right from the home screen. And if you miss tip-off, no worries. You can play same-game parlays live during the action. Plus, it's never been easier to find and bet on the biggest matchups of the day, so you can keep up with all the action. Caesars Sportsbook, proud partner of the NBA and the only sportsbook app with Caesars Rewards. Download it today.
Welcome back to the Saints Insider Podcast for June the 4th. I'm Zach Ewing with Matthew Paris and Luke Johnson. We encourage you all to subscribe to the Saints at NOLA.com YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, sign up for notifications, share it with your friends, all that good stuff. Continue to help our channel grow as we go into the offseason here. One more OTA availability, that's tomorrow, and then minicamp is just next week, right?
Yeah.
Are we 2 weeks away?
Next week.
Next week, and then we go into sort of the dark period where we'll do a lot of talking, but we won't see the team again until training camp starts. So it's getting down to it here. Going through the Saints defense, we'll spend a word on middle linebackers before we go to the secondary. This is probably the one spot where these guys aren't changing what they do too much. Demario Davis is going to be the mainstay in there. Pete Werner will be in there. Anything you guys want to say about middle linebackers?
Yeah, I think I just referenced this on last week's show, but I want to reiterate. I think there's a chance that Demario does a little bit more pass rush this year, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that's still where he's been really, really good the last couple of years is like the blitzing, getting north and south. I think there's a skill to blitzing that isn't just like how fast you are. He's really good at that. I think he's a really good pass rusher. When he gets a shot at the quarterback, he usually delivers. So I do think that there's probably going to be more chances for him in that role. But obviously, like they got to pick and choose their spots with that.
Yeah, I'll focus on Pete Werner. You kind of hit on it last week too. Does this scheme unlock some of that production that just hasn't been there?
Yeah.
Does it put him in position to grab an interception, to force the fumble, Does he start to convert some of those big plays that have solely, it just hasn't been there? And he's a good player otherwise, and it's frustrating to see because he is just a really solid talent, and they really suffered without him last year when he was hurt.
Yeah. Okay. So Pete Werner's played in 56 games in 4 seasons. So, it's an average of what? 14 per season. 1 interception, 5 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries.
And by the way, the 1 interception was in Houston, and he fumbled it away.
No, that was Zach Bond.
Oh, that was Zach Bond.
0.5 sacks. So
confusing my linebacker.
It's just he's a solid, dependable player.
When was Pete's interception?
Pete's interception was in 23. I can't remember who it was against.
Man,
Bears? Tyson Bagent?
That's a good guess.
I would have bet that was Werner who fumbled that away. I had that completely wrong in my memory.
Yeah, it's just he's just like he's been solid, right? He doesn't do anything wrong. He's a good tackler. He's pretty good in coverage, though he had a little bit of a down year in coverage in 23. But like he just for whatever reason he just has not been. He's not been an impact player. Yeah, I don't know what the reason is for that. I don't know if that's just what they're asking him to do, or if he's just not wanting to. If he's a player who doesn't want to take risks. I think there's some players who do that. Like Quan Alexander was a risk taker, but Quan Alexander would give you 4 or 5 game changing plays a season. It's. I think it's a concerning thing for me with Pete Werner. Again, good player, but that stuff matters. That's the important stuff to have in your linebacker core. And they just signed him to an extension last year. So if they are able to get more of that out of him, that'd be great.
By the way, Rod Walker, he's here, but he's working on Pelican stuff with the assist from across the room. The interception was against New England. I think Mac Jones might have thrown an interception to you that day, which is why we don't really remember it. But yeah, and by the way, Zach Bond, since we were talking about it, probably doesn't really even feel bad about that Houston thing anymore, considering he now has a pick 6 in the Super Bowl.
I'm sure he doesn't feel bad about much.
He's kind of past that point of his career.
Got a lot of money.
Okay, so that's the story with the linebackers. They obviously have Danny Stutzman there for some depth. In the secondary, we mentioned this at the top. The kind of star player of Brandon Staley's defenses throughout his career has been literally the star position, which is sort of this
minus Aaron Donald, right?
Well, Aaron Donald will be a star in any defense, right? Yeah. But we're talking about Derwin James, we're talking about Jalen Ramsey. How do you guys describe this star position that they have tabbed Alontae Taylor for?
Nickel cornerback.
Is it just as simple as that? He's the nickel?
I mean, Derwin James was a little bit.
He was a safety, but they played him.
So Derwin James was a safety who they played a lot in the slot, and Jalen Ramsey was an outside corner who they played a lot in the slot. So I think there is some degree of variance between star and nickel, but
if a spade, it's a spade.
For the most part, it's it's kind of traditionally been the nickel in Brandon Staley's defense. Though I think there's room within that for interpretation. Right, it's kind of typically where they're lined up, but I think they try to use that position to create opportunities for the defense to make plays.
This will be on the list of training camp stories, or maybe mandatory minicamp stories, or even tomorrow when we get out there. I need to ask more about this, frankly, because I think
one part
I want to
of
see
it
how
is
they look at it. Basically,
this position crashes in a little bit more. He becomes the 8th run defender. He'll rush the passer a little bit. I think there's an element of that to this, especially with Taylor.
Right. Yeah, and that's stuff that he's done well. Although I think his tackling kind of slipped last year. I do think that he's he was guilty.
He said
about
times.
the Saints defense.
Yeah.
But look, he is an aggressive player, right? And he's kind of like a heat-seeking missile when he's right.
And that's when he's wrong, it's because the missile missed its mark. He wants to be the hit stick.
Right.
And he sometimes would whiff. And then all of a sudden it's a big play behind him. So he's got to work on that.
But I'm excited to see it though. I want to see what he looks like at his full potential. Because again, we keep saying this if about these guys. But if they are able to do that with at least one of these guys, and Alontae being, I think, primary for me, he could be a really, really, really good player if he's able to play more consistent and within the defense. And if they're trying to feature him and take advantage of some of his really special, unique qualities. Like, there are not many corners who can rush the passer like he can. It's just a fact. Like kind of like I was just saying about this with Demario. Like, there's a lot of guys who blitz, and are sent as an extra rusher, but not a lot of guys who can like consistently deliver. And Taylor is one of those guys. Like, Brandon Staley should be watching those first couple weeks of last year's film and being like, "Oh hell yeah! Like, I've got a player there. I can do some of this stuff with it." The Saints just frankly kind of ignored for the back half of last year.
I think that's why he's chosen for that role.
Yeah.
My question, one question I have about the position is, when the Saints are in base defense, is Alontae always on the field anyway, even though he's a nickel?
Yes.
Who comes off the field from the secondary? Then is it one of the outside corners?
It'll be Quincy Riley,
whoever's not Kool-Aid McKinstry at this point.
Yeah.
And we'll see if they sign somebody like Asante Samuel Jr., which like I think is, I'm probably not super confident about that, even though they're interested in him. And maybe that changes, but I think right now it's like Alontae and Kool-Aid McKinstry are their corner 1 and 2 corners, and whoever is number 3 in that pecking order is going to be coming off the field when they're in base.
Oh, for Taylor, I don't think we can. Him going back to the inside is going to be huge for him.
Yeah.
Just think about the way defenses picked on him when he went back to outside last year, and that was maybe the most surprising thing to me about the slide of last year's defense. You could tell me that the run defense is bad. Okay, I could see a scenario. Tackling, okay, the older players getting older. Sure. I did not expect Alontae Taylor, when he had to go back to outside, to struggle the way he did, because one, he played pretty well when he was an outside corner, and then two, the whole time he said, "Oh, I view myself more as an outside corner." His best skill set now is inside, and I think that's going to be really big for him. I know the scheme is different and there's different responsibilities, but I just think he's become comfortable with learning how to play with a little bit with the space that the inside requires, leveraging that help and stuff. And using him as a blitzer, I think, is really smart, and it's just a skill set that suits him more.
Yeah, I think he's the guy you could really, he and Chase Young, like we said at the top, are the guys you could see take a real leap in this defense. The rest of the secondary guys, your safeties, Tyrann Mathieu and Justin Reed, and then the corners, Kool-Aid McKinstry, and whoever ends up on the other side, whether it's Quincy Riley, Asante Samuel, or another free agent pickup, whether it's Ike Yadam, which I don't think is what the Saints want to happen, but whoever that is over there, how do their roles change in this defense? I know we mentioned the Saints probably will play more zone, kind of take some of the pressure off of those guys, but what do you think about that group?
Yeah,
well,
go ahead.
I think one of the interesting things that Jeff brought up yesterday, which shouldn't surprise really anybody who's watched modern football, is I think they're going to be playing a lot of the shell coverages that we've seen just kind of take over football. And I don't know the numbers off the top of my head for what kind of percentage of Saints ran that stuff last year, but I don't think it was as high as what they'll run this year, where they'll be in a lot of deep safety looks, trying to prevent teams from kind of taking the top off the defense, and they'll be playing a lot more zone coverages. And I think that role will suit Tyrann Mathieu better. I think we saw Justin Reed play a very similar style of defense last year with Kansas City, and I think he played very, very well in that role. So I think just the like structure of the defense is going to help him out that way, specifically at safety. And yeah, I think that's also going to help them out when you're talking about like who is in their cornerback room. Like, they don't have like the stud defensive backs that they've had in recent years, but I do think that that not asking them to run across the field with Davante Adams 50 plays a game is probably going to help them out.
Yeah, I mean, the too high look is a really good point, because if that can just cut down on the explosive amount of plays that this team gave up. Like, think about the games that changed last year. The Philly game with the 60-yard breakdown. explosives, all like that Carolina loss they blew late because of explosives. Like that was the big problem in the Dennis Allen era, is they just choked at the wrong times. But a lot of the reasons they choke is because they gave up way too big of plays, and if that too high look can help cut down on some of those explosives, then yeah, they should all for it.
Is this going to be a less aggressive defense than it was under DA? Is that the wrong way to characterize it?
No, I don't think so. I think I think it just depends on what your definition of it is. I think they're going to be blitzing more, but they're not going to be playing as much man coverage, which I think is an aggressive coverage to play. Playing man allows you to do some other things, but I think like we're gonna be seeing them spend a lot more time in zone coverages, but more time also varying the rush plans and sending guys from different different portions of the field instead of kind of relying on that front four to win with just straight up pass rush or stunts or twists or anything like that. So yes, more aggressive in a sense and less aggressive in another sense.
And the NFL is obviously a copycat league, and a lot of these teams around the league have started to implement these two high shells more, and you've seen kind of the swing the other way where now offenses are running more, and does it react with that? The question I have is, this reminds me of last year of what the Saints wanted to do, where they brought in Clint Kubiak and had the Kyle Shanahan disciple. It feels like, to me in the NFL at least, that teams have been a lot more successful trying to copy the Shanahan offense and that scheme and everything it unlocks, whereas people see the Fangio scheme and it's been a lot more mixed of the hit rate. Like Evero in Carolina, their defensive coordinator, runs that type of scheme, and Carolina's defense has been pretty good. Like I think that's a success.
Yeah, he was awesome in Denver too.
Yeah, It's just, I think it's a little bit harder to kind of replicate this defense league-wide. And maybe I'm wrong, but I just, that's something that I'll be monitoring to see, like, all right, is this actually going to work wonders for the Saints?
Yeah, and I do think that you brought up a point earlier about this being a transition year too. Yeah. That like there's a chance the scheme is good, and they just don't have the right players to run it. Even if they're marrying, what they currently have as well as they can. And even if it's not like this dramatic change from a 4-3 to a 3-4 that it used to be when you're doing this sort of thing, there's just a chance they just still don't have the right players to run this defense.
You think about the Dennis Allen transition, too, from taking over from Rob Ryan. Like, our defense was not good until, Allen's third season, and the 2017 draft played a huge role in that. But they really took a few years to get going, too.
Yeah, they were just much better than worse than NFL history.
Right, yeah.
But to your point though, like Dennis Allen had a specific archetype of player, right? There was a reason they drafted Peyton Turner and Marcus.
It's funny to see it
Davenport,
happening in Chicago
and they signed Tano Pasnio. Like all these, like they had a basketball team for their defensive line group, and it's just, I don't think that's going to be what we're going to see. That's why they're asking him to drop weight. I think it might take a season or two for this to truly mature and be what it's supposed to be. But I do think that there are elements to this defense that will show an improvement over last year's.
Yeah, I mean the Saints gave up 379 yards a game last year.
And how many were on the ground? They were number 31 in the NFL, and
they were number 30 overall. So that should get better just almost by default, because you were almost at the bottom, just with some better execution and things. But I do think if we're talking level of confidence in this unit, it's got to be wait and see. There's too many new faces, period, but also new faces in different roles.
Can they not be in the bottom quarter of the NFL defense? Reasonable, right?
Should be.
Can they be like the number 22 or 23 defense in the NFL?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, they could.
Yeah, it's reasonable, right?
Yeah, I was thinking like the 24 or 25.
Well, especially given the opponents they're facing. They got to face the Bills, the Rams, maybe the Niners or the Bucks. But they're not. It's not like they're facing a list of the NFL's top offenses.
Can they not give up 170 rushing yards to Sean Tucker? Right? You know what I'm saying? Like last year's defense was really, really bad, and And the most concerning part about that was we could talk ad nauseum about all the injuries the Saints went through last year, and the defense went through a share, right? Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Debo, etc. But for the most part, they had their guys. Like they had a relatively healthy by NFL standard defense, and it was not close to good enough.
Yeah, the two other areas of concern that we haven't talked about yet. One, the depth on this defense, I just don't think is where it needs to be. Now, maybe some of the rookies and stuff that they brought in can help elevate that, but just watching OTAs and you're looking at the second and third team out there and you're just kind of wondering, like, how will they do if these guys actually have to play? And then two, and I think this is a bigger concern of mine, is if the offense can't stay on the field, the defense is going to be on the field more, and that's where I think you could still bottom out. Like, they're just on the field all the time. They give up too many yards because the offense can't stay on the field. Like that's one of the more worst case scenarios for me with this unit. Is just I don't like the offense needs to pull its weight for them to actually have a chance at being in that 20 range.
Yeah, which leads, best defense is a good offense. Got to run the ball.
Right.
Got to soak up some clock. We're going old school football here.
Yeah, we'll see.
That's the Saints' options are limited. I think that's what we have to say about the team and the defense. So that's going to do it for our show today.
Wait, before we a quick shout out to my friend Catherine Fitzgerald, who covers the Buffalo Bills, who was just honored as the Therese Paler Emerging Writer by the Pro Football Writers Association. So congrats to Catherine. She's a great beat writer and one of the funniest Twitter follows in the NFL beat world. So
give
congrats,
Catherine. Yeah. All right. For our producer, Norman Bell, Rod Walker for the assist on Pete Werner's interception. He's Matthew Paris. He's Luke Johnson. I'm Zach Ewing. And we'll see you next time on the Saints Insider.
Who am I? What is the show?